Hi folks, we're here today at the Blessed Church Vineyards kitchen. We're going to do a demonstration for the Merlot Braised Lamb Shanks. So in front of us here we have all our mise en place, so that's everything we need to do the entirety of the job right in front of us, so we're not looking for things at the last minute and making it frenetic. So we'll be smooth. There's a lot of steps here, but it's all pretty simple. And one of the benefits of this recipe, this is the way that I like to braise. There's many different ways of doing it. This is the way I like to do it. I think it tastes good. And so once you've done this methodology for this dish, you can apply this same kind of recipe for any kind of braising cut. So like a short rib, beef cheek or pork cheek, all things that I really like. So what I have now is my oven is preheated to 300, which will be the cooking temperature. This will be done in the oven primarily, other than the first steps of the searing and whatnot. You can certainly do this on the stovetop if you wish with a lidded Dutch oven like we have here, but I prefer it in the oven. You do other things. So we have your salt and pepper. I have my Merlot here, red wine vinegar, tomato paste, the spice mix that will be included in your package. I have my mirepoix here, which is carrots, onions, celery, and of course some garlic. I have the 2 lamb shanks here, some fresh thyme and a bay leaf, and my implements that I'll need for doing all this stuff. I also have my trusty stack of rags, which that's one of my things. I need to have a stack of rags working with me. Okay, folks, this is preheating while we're doing this. So by the time I get to going here, well, the temperature we need. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put a little tiny bit of a neutral oil. You can use a canola or grapeseed, something that has a high burn point, a high smoke point, because we're doing some pretty high heat cooking here for this stage. And I'm just going to do a little tiny bit of oil on these, and that's going to allow the spice blend and the salt and pepper to really adhere to the shanks themselves. So I didn't mention what the spare bowl is for, and that is for once the shanks are seared, I'm going to remove them from the pot and place them there to reserve for me to do more of the process. So I use kosher salt myself. I'll season this quite liberally. I'll start with the salt first because that's the most kind of important. So I know the salinity of this salt quite well, so that's how I know how much salt I'm using. Other salts have a higher salinity, use less. So then I'll put some pepper. I grind a bunch of pepper ahead of time because it'd be a lot of pepper to grind on camera here. And then our spice mix here. So this is a blend. You'll see the breakdown of the blend in your recipe. And this spice blend here and the whole dish is really to key in, to marry well, to pair well with the Blessed Church Merlot. And it's a nice wintry dish. You can't see outside right here probably, but it's snowing outside right now. This is a good wintry dish. Also, I have 2 liters of beef stock here at the ready. I may not need it all, depending on the size of your vessel. You just need to have at least to the shoulders of the piece of meat covered, if not a little bit higher, to be properly braising. So I may not need all 2 liters, I might. So I have 2 liters at the ready. So now I'm going to check my heat. I'm going to turn it up a little bit. I do want there to be, and I can feel it's warm, so I want there to be a little bit of oil, maybe a tablespoon, and then I'm going to start to sear. So what we'll do first is to check to see, and I want my shank to be dry, blot off any moisture other than the oil and that we put on there, because that will spatter and inhibit the searing, which we're going to be doing. So I can hear a light sizzle, so we're going to give a couple seconds and a little bit more heat to turn a little higher.
So John, why do you sear ahead of braising? Is that a critical step for this dish?
This voice in the ether that we're hearing is Lisa Baxter Burke. She's the experience manager here at Blessed Church Vineyards. And yes, it's a critical step. If you braise with meat that's not been really browned off, I find you'll really get a kind of a blood flavor to the meat. So that's the primary thing though is this flavor building. This is layering flavors. That's why braised meat is so good. The texture, but also the layers of the tomato, the vinegar, the wine itself, all the mirepoix, and our spice blend, and of course the meat itself. So I can smell the oil, and we're looking for here is to have a nice shimmer, or when you test it, that's what we want to hear. So that's a good level of sizzling. And so carefully put the shanks down in the oil. And now this plate that I've used to season the meat on has raw meat on it, so we're going to put that away. and we'll reserve the shanks in here once they're fully seared over on all sides. So monitor the heat as you need. And if you need a little more oil, you can put a little more oil in, but the shanks themselves, once they start to sear, will render off some of the fat, which will create more fat in the bottom of the pan, which we need for this point, also caramelizing the mirepoix.
So John, you use canola oil here. Why wouldn't you use olive oil?
Olive oil has a much lower smoke point, and so we don't want to have that kind of acrid burny taste. And also I find a lot of the flavor benefits and nutritional benefits of olive oil can burn off at a higher heat. So we want to have a pretty high heat for searing here. We don't want to have any of that scorchiness, and also the beautiful, like I said, the beautiful flavor of olive oil we lost. So you certainly could if you wanted to, but
Canola oil is definitely recommended.
canola oil is recommended. Also, it's the Canadian product that we grow here in Canada. So I'm going to put a little bit more oil in the pan, because with some of the spices here, we don't want to scorch and burn the spices too. They'll become acrid and bitter.
So braising is a really long process. Is this something that you could do a day or two ahead of time?
You certainly could, and I actually almost recommend that, because like a lot of people say with stews and soups and chilies, once it has a chance for the flavors to marry, the next day will be even better, taste even better. So, and also, as we'll explain towards the end of the dish when we're plating it, it's easier to handle. You have more time to reduce the sauce if need be. So, with braising meat, we're not using any flour to coat the meat with, like you might do, like some recipes might do, which is totally fine. Yeah, so the collagen coming out from the shanks themselves will lend richness to and body to the sauce. Also, the stock that you're using, if it has a really, if it's a homemade stock with a lot of bones, it'll be really rich in collagen. You might need to reduce it less. And so at the end of this process, to finish the sauce, we will be reducing the braising liquid to become our sauce at the end.
Yum.
So yes, having more time to deal with all that is beneficial, but mostly for flavor-wise. And also, too, if you wanted to make more than just 2 shanks, you certainly can do that. Big key, though, when you're trying to brown like we're doing now, is to not crowd the pan, because what happens is it creates steam, and so that inhibits the crusting. And the crusting is what we really want to build here. We really want to develop that.
So if you were making this for 4 people, so if you had 4 shanks, for instance, you would want either a much bigger pan or maybe 2 pans?
Correct. Or you can do it in stages.
Okay.
Yeah. So what I'm just doing here is I'm monitoring the shanks, making sure they're going to get some caramelization deep on each side. And what we're going to probably do here is then, if the spices have gotten a little bit of color, which they are right now, it's okay. We're going to then pour off that fat and start anew with new fat when we do the vegetable stage, because we want to richly caramelize the vegetables as well.
So each one of these steps is really important to get that juicy flavor that you're looking for.
Yeah. And so I can see on a couple of sides, I have the nice deep golden. So for example, that's what we're kind of looking for, but a little further along than that. But that kind of color where the fat is caramelizing is really key, a really key step.
Where are these lamb shanks from?
These are Australian shanks. We're doing those. They're the most easiest to find. I mean, it's possible to find some BC shanks, but really I find it quite difficult. So there is sources if you can source them out, but most specialty butcher shops will have lamb shanks, primarily from Australia, perhaps New Zealand. There is BC lamb and Alberta lamb available, but if you check to your local butcher or good quality butcher, they'll be able to source them for you if not have them already.
So your recommendation is to go visit your butcher if you're going to be doing this recipe?
I love butchers. Butchers are your friend and great to have, especially quality ones who can help you find the things that you need to make cool, tasty things.
And was there any trimming or anything that you had to do to these?
Not with these shanks. You unlikely will have to do that if you're getting from the butcher shop.
So it's a pretty, self-contained kind of cut and eat them. That's pretty easy.
Yeah, and it's portion control, because I basically put 1 shank per person.
Fantastic.
So we're getting close to that stage, folks. So you got some nice rich caramelization. I'm gonna peel this off now. And then I'm gonna pour out this fat before I commence the next stage. So I have a little soup can here, which I use to collect all my old oil. So I'm just going to pour that off. Just because I got a little bit of color on this spice blend, which is going to happen. That's a-okay. So now we're just going to start again with a little bit more fat. You can see the pan is still hot. And then working quickly here, I'm going to do the vegetables. So if you're wondering why the vegetables are cut so large, and also with the onions with the root still intact on both sides, these vegetables rather, will not be used at the end of the dish. These are only using to flavor our dish here. So carefully put them down in the fat, flat side down. And again, we want to hear that noise again. Be careful, don't drop the onion in the fat when your hand is so close. You should probably use the tongs I have in my hand, but it's too late now, and so I don't want to look tough. Because if you drop that, you will burn yourself very badly when the oil splatters back on you. So onions flat side down, we're really going to caramelize those onions. That'll give us a lot of color in our finished sauce and a lot of depth and flavor, and the sweetness from the onions caramelizing as well. Carrots, these are just like sort of teenage carrots, so I've only washed and scrubbed them. I haven't peeled them. You can certainly peel them if you wish, or if you have the jumbo storage carrots, you might want to peel those guys. But we're going to same thing, really get caramelized. These I will put in towards the end. I'm not going to caramelize these. This is my personal preference. And also the garlic, I will caramelize a little further along in the process because they won't take as long as the onions and carrots will. So about that level of sizzling is what we want. I really want to build that flavor. And I can see myself right away, the onions are going to get some color. So like that, but even more so, like the whole way around. And the carrots, again, you can kind of turn and rotate a little bit to get them evenly browned. But bear in mind, same with the lamb, like we're going to get the proper sear and caramelization by leaving them alone. Don't move them around a lot. You want to let them build that kind of flavor up. And what that's doing is, as these are caramelizing, it's leaving behind brown bits in the pan. That's called the fond. We want that fond. So that's why I poured that oil that was a little bit, had the spices got a little bit kind of brown on them, is I don't want that, but I do want the fond that's developing in the pan right here. And we're going to deglaze that with the wine and the vinegar in a few steps forward. So I can see these carrots are really caramelizing nicely. I'm now going to, see, that's what I want. That's great. Check that one, great. So see how dark that is? It's rich, it's not burnt. Really, really, really dark though. That's going to lend a lot of flavor. Okay, so now what we're going to do is grab a spoon here, and then next I'm going to go in my tomato paste. And so the tomato is tomato paste is great for braising, and then a lot of depth of flavor. And also it has acid in it from tomatoes, and the acidity of the wine and the vinegar and the tomatoes is really also going to help break down the meat itself and become more tender. So also the lower heat, moist cooking technique, but also all the acid. So we want to caramelize that tomato paste, and so I'm going to roll that around a bit quickly in the fat. And you see how quickly it caramelizes? That's great too. So now we have, let's get our stock at the ready, because now we're getting ready to go. It's all going to happen more quickly now. So let's go vinegar next. It's going to steam and bubble, and that liquid of the vinegar, and quickly then let that come down a little bit. Then the wine. So it sounds like you can go your heat a little bit down now, because you can hear it's going pretty aggressively. That's okay, we're just going to monitor that. I don't want to reduce this all the way. So now, that tomato paste is cooked off a little bit. The pan's been deglazed in with my stock. And that's going to slow things right down. So that's 1 liter of the stock, and we'll see how much we need. So now at this point, I'm just going to make this, all come together. I can smell it. Obviously, you can't smell it, but I can smell the, sort of the tang of the vinegar in the air, the richness of the wine, the Merlot as it kind of reduced quickly in the pan there. I'm getting some of the hints of the, some of the notes of the Merlot. And the whole point of this recipe is, like I said before, is to really pair well with the Blessed Church Merlot, award-winning Blessed Church Merlot. And this is what the spice blend you'll be getting in your kit. So now we're just going to let this come up to a boil here. And once that comes out to a boil, I think we're probably going to have enough liquid in here to braise. but we might need to add a little bit more. If we need to add a little more, we'll do so.
So braising is always in liquid then?
Braising is always in liquid, and braising is certain cuts only. Like I would never braise, braising is for really working muscle cuts. So like the short rib, cheeks, of course, cheeks are a muscle that's using every second. Same with shanks. Every time the animal moves its legs, the muscles are moving. So things that are like, if you were to roast that quickly in half an hour, you would never be able to chew through it. But a couple hours in a nice acidic, warm, winey bath, yes.
So you wouldn't braise tenderloin, for instance?
I really wouldn't,
okay.
Personally. People do, like I said, there's other techniques, people do other things. So now I can see we're getting some bubbles coming to the surface here. So I'm gonna put the shanks in and we're gonna see how much coverage we have with the liquid. So braising, I was always taught in early days of cooking that braising means to the shoulders, like I mentioned earlier. So, and once I add this shank in there too, it should really be good. So, you can see the shanks are nestled in there in their bath. They're definitely covered to the shoulders. So we're looking good to go. I have the bay leaf. You can certainly, if I'm doing a larger amount, I would probably use butcher twine to tie this together, or I have a bouquet garni of other herbs as well. But because thyme's gonna stay in the stem, and I don't mind having a little thyme leaves in myself, because we're gonna strain the finished sauce anyway, that can go right in. And like I mentioned before, oven is already preheated, so we're just gonna wait this come fully to a boil. I might add a little touch more stock.
And at this point, you'll add the garlic and the celery?
At this point I will, yeah.
Okay.
So that's probably good. We're gonna check this monitor. It'll be about a 3.5 hour cook time in the oven. I have it at 300, so you can certainly go a little higher if you want to. I don't like to go a whole lot higher for braising. So celery in, garlic in. Do a little bit of tidying while we're waiting. And once just up to a boil, lid on, heat off in the oven.
So about what temperature do you have your burner at now?
I have it on pretty high now because I am trying to get it hit up to a boil, but I'm always monitoring. Really, that's one of the things I think about cooking so much is it's controlling time and controlling temperature to the best of your ability, right? So we can turn the heat up if we want it to go quicker, turn it down if we want it to go lower, obviously. But I'm watching it,
This isn't the place where you can walk away. So when it's in the oven, that's when you can walk away.
Then you can walk away.
All right.
Because I want this to be fully up to temp before I fire it in the oven, because as soon as the lid goes on, it'll, so we're really getting close now. So I'm gonna go lid on any second now.
So this is a Dutch oven enameled, cast iron enamel pot. Is that what you would recommend for this kind of application?
Yes, indeed, or a heavy bottom stainless steel pan. I don't like to cook braising in aluminum pots because the acid in the wine and the vinegar and the tomato paste will kind of etch and oxidize the aluminum, I find. So there you go, heat off, oven preheated. Basically anything with a heavy bottom that will retain the heat well for searing, and the heavy cast iron walls of that pot will retain the heat really, really well for this whole process. So now we're in the oven. I'm gonna do some tidying up and we'll see you in about 3 hours. Okay, folks, we are back. It's been about 3.5 hours, and like I alluded to earlier in the previous segment, every pot is different, every oven is different, the amount of stock might vary whoever added, so it'll be in the range of 3 to 4 hours. So we're about bang on 3.5 hours, and I'm gonna take the lid off and we're gonna see what we got. All right, all of these things are a good sign to me. It smells very good. I can see the obvious braising marks on the pan. I'm just gonna put that over here for now. I will be scrubbing that later. So here's a few tips, what I know when we're looking good. So you can see how, like, it's coming off the bone, but it's not all falling apart. I don't really want it falling apart. I don't want mushy cat food. I want there to be texture, but also tender. So, like I said before, we're not gonna use these veg. You can't see it now, but that's very soft, that carrot. And the onions too, they're all falling apart. The celery is soft. That means all the flavor from that mirepoix has been lent itself into the braising liquid. But I can see now that we're not thick, thick, thick. I don't need it to be thick, thick, thick. If you want it to be thick, 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 you can reduce it down to that stage. But what we're gonna do here, because one of the keys for braising too is to like we always let our meat rest when we're roasting a meat or grilling a steak. Same thing here, I want it to cool down in the liquid. So what we're gonna do is I'm going to strain, bear in mind the pot is still very, very hot. I'm gonna strain some of this braising liquid into my strainer to a smaller pot, and then we'll commence reducing that a little tiny bit while the shanks themselves just still sit in here, relax. This braising liquid, you're gonna have more than you need for all this sauce, so they can sit, and you can even glaze a little bit over top too. You may want to check the braising halfway through, so say at 1.5 hour point or even at an hour and look. I did, and I rotated my shanks over 180 degrees. So I basically just spun them. Also very careful because they are gonna be very tender, which is what we want. So when we go to remove these finally, I'm going to take my tongs and a spoon to support the bottom so it doesn't just fall apart in a big sloppy mess. So here I got a couple ladles of the stock now. So I'm just now going to put this burner on. Secret technique. So at this point too, I can see that I want to take some of the fat off the top. Now if you wanted to make this ahead of time like we talked about earlier, you could let the whole thing, you could do this process of straining all the mirepoix out and then cooling the shanks back in the jus and then let it cool down room temperature quickly and put it in your fridge, and the next day you can skim the fat off like it'll be solid and then do this whole process. We want to serve it right now like we're doing. I'm going to do my best to take as much of the fat off here. You'll see some floaty bits, that'll be some of the spice mix that's come off, some pepper, maybe the leaf of thyme. So because we didn't have a lot of fat in the bottom of the pan to start with before we made our braising liquid with all the wine and vinegar and stock and whatnot, I don't have to remove a lot of fat. So we're gonna leave this here for now. That's gonna sit and chill while we reduce this. And that'll probably be a couple minutes. And because there's no flour, it's just gonna be reduction, so evaporation of excess moisture to make our sauce be as thick as we want it to be. So what we're gonna do is I'm gonna finish doing this, let these cool down a bit because they're too hot to even to eat. In the meantime, off camera, I've made a few things just to kind of complete the plate, just show you what it'll look like. And so I'm gonna bring this down to the texture that I like. I've also finished making, while the lamb was cooking, we did the compote. The recipe will be included. So this is the Merlot and dried fruit compote. This will be a nice accompaniment. So some bright acidity from some of the fruit in here, and also some sweetness from the fruit in there. And the wine that we use to cook with is the wine that we're gonna drink. So we're gonna have a Merlot in the compote, Merlot in the braising liquid, and then we're going to enjoy it with our beautiful award-winning Merlot here from Blessed Church Vineyards. So this is going to carry on reducing. I'm going to plate these things, and we'll see you soon. Okay, folks, here we are. We're almost at the best part. We have to eat the lamb and drink the wine. So today, just to make it a complete plate, we did a little parsnip and skin on potato, olive oil crushed potato, and just some carrots to go along there. And so I did reduce the sauce, probably about, maybe about 10 minutes. So you'll see it definitely is thicker, and that's just from reduction alone. So like I said, no additional flour in the sauce. If you like doing that, you certainly can. So I'm just gonna really just glaze these shanks.
So this dish then is totally gluten-free as is, right?
Totally gluten-free.
Wonderful.
Now, I really like the unctuousness of braised meat with, a certain side. So for example, polenta would be fabulous with this, especially with also some of the fruit notes and the compote as well. But also a risotto would be fine, although myself is more of a purist. I like risotto as a dish on its own. You certainly can do that. A veg mash, just sauteed veg, I mean anything you really like, really. But potatoes are fabulous. And being that I'm a little bit French trained, I love potatoes myself. Sorry, I got these little dots. All right, so that's enough sauce. There's more sauce and much more in the pot. And the sauce is great for many, many things. So this is some of that Merlot compote. You can certainly use as much or little as you like. Of course, it'll look better if I just use a little tiny bit right now for the plate. And like I said before, looking at the shank, you see how the bone has come away, the meat's come away from the bone rather. And then we're gonna do, with a nice finishing salt, just a little bit of Vancouver Island salt, included in your package. I'm just gonna put a little tiny pinch on top of the lamb. Of course we seasoned it, but a little texture, some nice, beautiful finishing salt is always a nice addition. And there we folks. Merlot Braised Lamb Shank with a Merlot stewed dry fruit to go with our beautiful award-winning Blessed Church Vineyard Merlot. Cheers.